again, I'm Marcie Frost. I'm the CEO at CalPERS, and today we're going to have a bit of a fireside chat, if you will, to explore mentoring relationships and how you can build success in your own organizations. So especially when it comes from diversity and inclusion. I think mentoring has proven to be very effective in increasing the number of women and minorities in your workforce. Unlike many of the other diversity initiatives that I think some of us have tried in the past. Research conducted by Professor Dobbin, who you also heard on a panel earlier this morning, shows that only 10% of the surveyed companies actually have mentoring programs in place. He also credits formal and informal mentoring to help build the gap between leaders and employees and helping to promote employees into leadership ranks. With us to tell their story, because again, I think storytelling is the most important way to illustrate the importance. We have two individuals. We have Verdun Perry, who is the Senior Managing Director and Co-Head of Strategic Partners Fund Solutions at Blackstone. And we also have Stephen Can, who's the founder and the other co-head of Strategic Partners Fund Solutions at Blackstone. So they do have an important story to tell about the value their mentoring relationship has brought to their own professional lives as well as to the company, and how their different backgrounds, where they grew up, where they lived most of their lives, and came to work at Blackstone. And so if you could just take a moment to welcome both Vern and Stephen. So speaking of backgrounds, why don't we set the stage a little bit for the conversation, and Vern, why don't we go ahead and start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I grew up in Philadelphia, inner city Philadelphia, specifically the Overbrook section of West Philadelphia. Active in sports, played football, basketball. I was relatively smart, although I didn't apply myself the way I should have back then. The neighborhood I grew up in was relatively rough. I didn't realize and appreciate how rough it was until I went off to college and started working, and I would come home and say, wow, this is rougher than I remember. With that said, growing up, I had both parents that were constantly instilling the value of education, and my brother, my sister, myself. Went off to college, Morehouse College, and I went there as a pre-med major. Realized quickly I didn't want to be a doctor, I wanted to be in business. And so I changed my major to finance. I was fortunate enough to be awarded an SEO internship in the career program, which was one of the things that changed my life. Went into investment banking right out of undergrad in 1994, did that for 2 years, worked at a holding company for 2 years, and then off to business school where I was a TWIGO fellow at Harvard Business School. And when I came out, I worked for Donaldson, Lufkin, and Jenrette and met this handsome guy to my left and was introduced to secondaries.
All right. Stephen.
Yeah. Anybody know where Syracuse, New York is? Yeah, some Orange fans. Well, I grew up 90 miles north of that, on the Canadian border. They got snow there last night. I stay in contact. I grew up on a small dairy farm, as many as my friends did. And yeah, we had 2 wood stoves in our house, a big one in the living room called a Kalamazoo, direct to you from Michigan, and a small wood stove for cooking. And it was a paycheck to paycheck type environment that I grew up in. Went to community college, and then ended up going to Purdue on a TA scholarship. I got my Master's of Science in Finance.
Yeah, okay.
Joined IBM for the International, some travel, because I really hadn't gone anywhere. And ended up in the pension plan because that's where all the money was. And I was fortunate to have a great mentor named Betty Sheets. I knew nothing about private equity. I got there in a haphazard way. Betty is still there today. And so I've had a great mentor in my life to get me opportunities.
Yeah, that's great. So now let's move to your careers at Blackstone. Vern, can you tell us the story of how the mentor-mentee relationship began and how it evolved?
Sure. So I'll start where we are now. We co-head, as we mentioned, strategic partners at Blackstone. But the mentor-mentee relationship really started back in 2000. So I was an associate, brand new, at Donaldson, Lufkin, and Jim Rett, where our fund was founded. And I started working with Stephen in August of 2000. And I'll try and keep this as concise as possible, but give you a sense for the ultimate answer. When I started working with Stephen in 2000, I had no idea what secondaries were. I met Stephen. He told me he grew up on a dairy farm, and I said, this is awesome. This is great. I don't know secondaries. I'm working with a guy who grew up on a farm. I grew up in inner city Philadelphia. I have nothing in common with this guy. What I learned over time, I couldn't be more wrong. I mean, it was absolutely false that we had nothing in common. But, you know, we started out, he was my boss. He was teaching me, pointing out things, stay away from that. You did good here. You have to learn this. And over time, you know, I built a respect for him because, really immediately, but more and more over time, because I realized his story in working and growing up on a farm, as he mentioned, paycheck to paycheck. I didn't have anything easy growing up. My parents didn't have anything easy growing up. And I looked at him and I said, I have a lot more in common, because if you had a bad year, the farm's gone. The bank has your farm. Everything that you worked for, blood, sweat, and tears, is gone. And every January 1, that clock, that metric starts over and over again. And so, you know, I found myself more in his office getting advice, not just business related, not just deal related, but life related, things to do with life. And so over time, you know, I'll tell you, he mentored me, he developed me, he protected me. And I'll just say right up front, just to level set, mentorship is more than what people think. It's mostly about sponsorship. People will put their name on the line for you, and you have to repay them. And the best way to do that is be your best. Be great at what you do. He laid his name down on the line to protect me and promote me. Well, you know, I was being promoted associate to vice president to director. And in 2009, in December, I was promoted to managing director. And I look at him and I said, he helped me do that. I have to thank him for that. But I'll tell you where the mentor-mentee relationship changed. It was in 2010. I'd just been promoted to managing director. Now, when I have an opportunity to speak to audiences like this, I try and share as much personal information as possible, good or bad. So here goes. I was a brand new managing director. In May of that year, my oldest sibling and only sister was diagnosed with cancer, stage 4. And that was in May. By late October, my mother called and said, you need to come home. It's gotten to the point it's not going to get better. And so I literally struggled to go into his office. I'm brand new managing director. It's a lot on the line. And I said simply to him, to Stephen, my sister's dying. I have to go home. And I'll never forget for the rest of my life his response. It was one word, a pause, followed by a short phrase. He said, go. Be with your family. I didn't respond. I left. I just left. Before I got in my car, I packed up my things and I went home. And I didn't know how long I was going to be there, but I was going to see that through, however long it took. And I checked my phone, my email instinctively, and there was a message which I won't go in. That's personal. But I'll tell you one of the parts of that message. It said, "Don't worry about here. Focus on what's important. I have your back. Go home." Now, I never told Stephen how important that was, but I'm telling you now in front of all these people. It's an intimate moment between us.
And all of you.
Now, here's the thing. On December 6, 2010, my sister passed away. But I was holding her hand. I was there. I watched my sister breathe her last breath. I know some of you have experienced that. There was no place in the world that I would rather be. As sad as it was, I was whispering words of encouragement. I saw that. But you know the beauty of it? I didn't have to worry about what was back at the office. I know that my firm, my boss, my mentor had my back. Now, when I came back to work after my sister passed, and that was about 3 weeks from the time I left, think about what that meant to me. We all get paid bonuses. We get carried interest as a way to incent and retain talent. What do you think that did? What value do you place on what he did for me? I can tell you it's priceless. What do you think that did for retention and inspiring loyalty? it was huge. So just think about that as a mentor. It's not just giving good business and good career advice, it's having someone's back through good, through bad, not just professionally, but personally. By 2012, Stephen had promoted me to co-head the business with him. And you think about that. He took me from someone who didn't know what a secondary was. We've now done more secondaries than anyone in history, on average 1 every 5 calendar days. And now I run the business with him. And so I owe a lot to Stephen. And over that period of time, he went from my boss to my friend to my partner. And I'll tell him, and I've told him before in front of others, but I'll tell you again, he's my family. He's more like a brother to me. And so that's the evolution of our mentor-mentee relationship.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
It's a very personal story as well. Stephen, so as I understand it, Vern approached you for this mentoring opportunity. Did Blackstone have a mentoring culture at that time, or is this something the two of you developed?
Yeah, so back then, a minute on Blackstone. Blackstone's got formal and they have informal mentoring. So, yeah, I can tell you we just hired a nice analyst. Her name is Diana. Her mentor is Eddie. Eddie is a great guy, and she'll be successful. We're going to make sure. Eddie's mentor was Boriana Karastoyanova. That's a mouthful. Mm-hmm. But Bulgarian and great at math and perfect at valuing companies and portfolios and without errors ever. So the mentoring in our group has gone on for a long time. Okay. Formally with people who just joined the team and informally later on. And that mentoring, and you said the right word, which was sponsorship. That comes later. I mean, that comes with different people in your career. But yeah, at the very beginning, I'd say it was more like initially when Vern joined our group. I don't know if you remember the first deal that we looked at.
I do.
Apollo 3.
Yep.
Yeah, we lost it. And
very successful.
Yeah. So here I've got this guy. He came from DLJ. They had these pools of high potential people, and Vern was in the associate pool. Came on loan to me, kind of like trying to figure out where he'd want to be. Mm-hmm. Came on loan to me, and I said, "Hey, we got this Apollo fund, good GP, should be able to buy this." We didn't. Smart, worked hard. So what would I tell them for advice? It's like, hey, you do a good job on everything. You have to be a good loser, because we're going to lose a lot of stuff, but be a good loser in life. And so it was really an apprenticeship for the first few years. We have these offsites, and we got together at one of these, and people tell their little story. We used to have a smaller group. We're 43 people today. Back then, we were like 12 or 15. They tell their story. And one of the people stood up and said, I've got an issue, and it was a serious personal issue. And Vern got up, put his arm around him, and said, we're family. Yeah. And I said to myself, we got a good guy here. And that's when the sponsorship started. Yeah. And here we are. Yeah. So you can't sponsor everybody. It doesn't work out that way. You got to choose. Mm-hmm. And so Vern voluntarily and involuntarily got some pretty good assignments, in my view. He got a great assignment called Project Clean Sweep, which was compliance for us, which was one. It was
a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. But you know what? He needs that. He needed that in his. He does, because compliance. You can't make compliance errors, right?
That's right.
Compliance. He was able to be successful in those, managed people well, and became a co-head of the group and a great partner. So.
Oh, that's great. So back to you, Vern, and I know you may have answered a part of this, but You know, like you, many professionals realize the value of building relationships with their colleagues at work to make smarter career decisions about where you might want to go next, what is of interest to you, and how do you really build out your strengths. So how did the fact that you are from such different backgrounds affect your relationship at work?
Well, I would say, you know, as I mentioned earlier, I thought that our differences would be an impediment. That just was wrong. Stephen has a totally different framework, a mindset than I do. At the core, we're very similar. We work hard, fire in the belly, we want to succeed, we want to help others, we want to help our communities. But he had a different angle than I did. So I found that when I had an issue, and he mentioned it, I had to learn to be a good loser. I was very aggressive, I wanted to win, and I had to learn I'm not going to win every deal. And by the way, winner doesn't always have to take all. I had that view where, yeah, this is our deal, and we're taking all of it. And sometimes the right answer is, why don't we share it? There doesn't have to be a winner and loser. The seller could win, we could win, someone else can win, even if they're a competitor. And so I learned these things, and he was sort of this diplomatic, statesman, patient. I was sort of, let's go now, let's take all of it, let's conquer. What are you talking about? I'm not waiting for you. And so, so I learned a lot from that perspective, and I would say, look, I have informal mentors outside of the firm, outside of my group, and you know, Derek Jones, who I saw here earlier, people I look up to, Robert Smith, other people that I call for advice, Willie Woods at ICV, you know, Ed Lewis at Cigna, Frank Borges at Landmark, and I get those views, but when I speak to Stephen, he often comes from a very different background, and so that, you know, I want a complete solution. The worst thing you can do is build a team of everyone thinking the same, looking the same. You're always going to get the same answer, and guess what? Your blind spot will always be in the same spot. You're always going to have that blind spot. And so Stephen covers my blind spot, and I like to think that I cover his.
Great. So at CalPERS, one of the mantras that we like to have on the executive team is our behaviors, the leadership behaviors, determine the culture of an organization. Yep. So this question is really for both of you. Aside, again, from making smart career moves and getting great advice, what would you say are the principal benefits that anyone can experience through mentoring, and how has that influenced the culture at Blackstone?
So our team is really one for all and all for one. It's a team that helps each other out. You know, most of our team has been through hiring people right out of college as analysts. They come with us for 2 to 3 years. They find out if they like our business. They find out how well they do at the business. They find out if they like us. We find out if we like them, how well we work together. It's a long period of time. During that period of time, they're stressed. They have time when they have free time. Do they help others? Everyone makes mistakes. Do they own up to them? Do they try to blame someone else? So we have this long, and during that time, people are trying to help them be successful. And so we've got that in the team. Okay. Take a long time to build a team of our size with people like that, but I would tell you that culture took time, and it is rewarding us today.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say, look, if you look at Blackstone as a firm, it really is built on excellence and teamwork. And we encourage people, regardless of your title, regardless of your function, regardless of where you're from. We're not going to ask where your parents went to school. We don't care where they went to school or if they went to school. We care about you. And so we encourage everyone to speak up, be heard, be confident. And so sort of this mentorship process and just sort of mentoring junior people, it's great for business, but it also sort of brings in sort of their personal life. If you have someone that you know for a fact has your back and your best interest, do you think you're more likely to share if your mom's sick, if you're dealing with some sort of personal challenge? And if you think personal challenges don't affect your professional life, you're wrong. Absolutely. If someone's dealing with something outside of work, it can creep into work. So to the extent you know what their life is like holistically, and by the way, we're not intrusive. We're not going to ask who you're dating and get in your business. That's not our business. But to the extent you're comfortable sharing with us, it's helpful. And I think whether it's our group or other groups across Blackstone, there's this sort of this idea that you have to replace yourself. If you do a great job, you're effectively finding your replacement. You have to train them. It's teaching them the craft, the esoteric aspects of what we do. You don't direct them to a sort of a website and say, why don't you Google it? You teach them. And so that's what this is mostly about. And the benefits of that are sort of two-way. We learn from our mentees. They learn from us. And if we do a great job, our business, our fund, our firm is better as a result.
So touching a little more on that, Stephen, as the mentoring relationship progressed, was there anything that surprised you about being a mentor? Anything that you hadn't planned on or thought you would learn as you entered this process?
If you tell someone this is so be a good loser.
Yep.
I hate losing, so I have to remind myself to be a good loser. Okay, because you really can't say do something and not do it. So. I say as reflection, it keeps yourself disciplined.
Okay. Just onto maybe a little different track here. So one of the barriers I think that we've heard in some of the research or read in some of the research is that it can be difficult for people to step outside of their comfort zone and really interact with people from different backgrounds, and that we tend to gravitate toward people who are more like us. So similar in culture, ethnicity, gender, age. Do either of you have any hesitation to work together because of those types of factors? Did that enter in early on? Obviously it didn't end there, but were there any issues as you two were paired up initially that you could share with the group?
Well, I'll start and feel free to jump in. I would say we weren't paired up per se. This wasn't a formal matching. And I will share with you just as an aside, and I know people may not like to hear this, but sometimes formal mentor-mentee relationships don't work. It's like coming home from college and sitting in your living room with your parents as someone you don't know, and your mom says, hey, here's your new friend. Congratulations. Doesn't really work. It has to be organic. It's best when it's organic. And by the way, formal programs where you just assign a mentor, you have to start somewhere, and hopefully some of those will work. But the organic, where you sort of work hard, someone recognizes that you have, the attitude, the work ethic that you deserve extra attention or mentoring, that works. I'll start there.
No issues.
No issues.
No
Okay.
issues.
Okay.
No.
Again, another key finding, I think, out of Professor Dobbins' research is that the more that people of different backgrounds work together toward a common goal, i.e. solving a problem together, the more that their biases about culture or other factors really kind of melt away and are set aside. And consequently, I think there's much more willingness to work together as that grows. So would you both say that that is true with the mentoring culture at Blackstone? Do you have problem-solving teams that have come together as a result of some of the successes of relationships like the two of you have?
Well, I would say, I'll sort of share it in this way, or share my response in this way. We have an investment committee, and we meet probably once a week, twice a week. Yeah. I mean, we're doing deals constantly. People of all colors, shapes, and sizes in that investment committee. Everyone approaches a problem differently. And by the way, if just one person says they don't want to do the deal, we don't do it. So we've done all of our deals by unanimous approval. And we do that for a reason. Regardless if you're an investment committee and you're a director or you're a senior managing director, your voice counts. And what we're teaching people is speak up, we're listening, we're watching, we're learning from you just as you're learning from us. And so if you think about an investment committee, you are collectively solving a problem. And by the way, losing isn't always bad. There's a lot of deals that we've lost that we're thankful we lost. And the reason we lost those deals is because we wouldn't pay a certain price. And that's because people speak up and say, I see this, I don't like it, or let's pay a lower price, or let's just skip it. So I would say we've been successful over a long period of time, 17 years. We've built our business from 0 AUM to 21 billion of AUM today. But that was based on the collective, not one person, not one segment of people. There's no race or ethnicity. You can dissect it any way you want, but no one has a monopoly on talent. No one has a monopoly on hardworking people. We're all that way. We all have the capability to be that way, so if we work together, the solution should be more holistic, it should be more complete.
Okay. So we have about 5 minutes left, and I'd like to ask just a couple more questions about some advice that you would have for the members of the audience. So, Stephen, how has your mentoring relationship enhanced? You talked a little bit about the decision-making process at Blackstone, where you have unanimous decisions on deals. In what other ways has it had an impact on your business processes?
Yeah, I'll touch on that a little bit more about the unanimous decisions.
Please.
So look, it's always good if someone can see a risk in the transaction that you haven't seen and you avoid a bad outcome. That's good. But here's the other thing I think that's really important about that. Anyone can kill a deal, and it's fine. We've got 50, 60, 70, 80 other deals to look at. Okay, so we've got a big pipeline coming through. The last thing I ever want is for our votes to go through and to have 2 people on the investment committee say, I hate this deal, I wouldn't do it, but by majority rule, we're doing it, right? Then the deal either does work better than expected or not as good as expected. Then you got the people who said yes to look at the people who said no and say, see, I was smarter than you. And you got the people, if it doesn't turn out as well, you get people who said, see, I told you it wasn't good. And you divide the team.
Right.
And this kills the community that you've built. So look, anyone can, and we have, they get killed a lot that way. But they get killed formally at our ICs too, where someone says, I don't like the risk of this.
Right.
And it's just, no one cares. I hate saying it, but no one cares. It's okay. It's done.
Right.
We're going to the next one. It's
Right.
done.
Move on.
But what I don't, and I've seen this with GPs, where you have 2 people who you can tell either liked or didn't like a deal. And then later on, that comes back to be just such a huge divide for them. And those are, people are the hardest thing in business. And if you can get people to work together, it's so much more powerful than people trying to do stuff by themselves.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so any final words of wisdom for again, the group that is here today on the value of mentoring generally? Stephen and Vern, anything that you would like to add to close out the session?
I'll say a couple things. So I mentioned it earlier. To the extent you can make a mentor-mentee relationship as organic and as natural as possible, please do that. Assigning a mentor, it can work sometimes, but oftentimes it doesn't. You have to find each other. And if you're a mentee, the best way to repay your mentor is work really hard, really smart, and be the best you can be. Because they invested in you, they laid their name on the line, you have to repay them that way. So I would say that. Second, the mentor relationship, if you're a mentor, it's about sponsorship ultimately. You can give advice, but you have to protect. You have to, when things go bad and someone's looking for their neck, if they don't deserve to have their head chopped off, say something. If someone deserves to be hired, hire them, speak up. That comes with being a mentor. It's not just answering a couple emails and then I'm a mentor. No, you returned a couple emails. That's what you did. So it's more than that. And then finally, and I'll just share a story to sort of drive home the last point. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, I went through this stage where I was afraid of everything. I was constantly asking my parents things like, do we have enough money? Do we have enough money for food? Is someone gonna break in the house? Is something gonna happen to me? And I'm serious. I mean, I was old enough at this age, it was about 7 or 8, and I was old enough to start hearing the news and seeing and realizing the world isn't as nice as I thought it was. My neighborhood's a lot different than I thought it was. And so I remember this like it was yesterday. My mother said on one of these, in response to one of my questions to my brother and I, she looked at me and said, if our family is starving, without a doubt, you're gonna eat. My kids eat first. I don't care what happens, whatever comes our way, I don't care what danger, I stand in front of you. I'll sacrifice myself to make sure you live. And I remember I started crying. Now at the time I didn't know why I was crying. I know now why. It was the ultimate expression of protection and love that I felt, that I was moved to tears. Now, as soon as my mom walked away, my brother promptly teased me for crying, but that's neither here nor there. By the way, people, it's okay to cry. So I'm just... Anyway, I cried. The reason I share that story is because I love the fact that all of you are here in this room, but the reason you're here in this room is less about you, and you know that. We don't often say it out loud. A lot of you are successful, you're fine, but you're here not for yourselves, but for people that aren't in this room, namely boys and girls in grade school, in high school, young men and women in college that haven't decided they want to be in asset management or private equity or hedge funds, but they will one day. And you want to make sure when they do get here, they're accepted, they're welcome, regardless of what they look like, regardless of their sexual orientation, regardless of their religion or what they look like or country of origin. And so I say to you, remember that when you're tired and you're saying, do I have to go to another diversity event? Do I have to speak up? Do I have to say something? It's not about you. It's about our kids. If you don't have kids, just think you do. It's about people that look like you. It's people that look like us. It's the right thing to do, and as someone mentioned earlier, my friend right here in the front row, it's a great business decision. It's the right thing to do. So if you're fighting, please keep fighting. And if you're running, or if you know someone that's running, just remember, it's easier to run in the short term, but long term it gets very tiring, and you won't feel as good about yourself in the long term. So please fight and join that fight.
Great, thank you. Stephen.
I like analogies and I like food. My favorite.
So says the farmer.
My favorite food
Yes.
is a simple fried egg with a little pepper on it, toasted piece of rye toast, one strip of bacon, that little piece of salt you have on there, and a cup of coffee. That's like my perfect morning. Go out sit by a deck, the dog's out there or something.
Yeah.
That's like great.
Did you get the picture?
I'd love that.
Yeah.
But you know, if I had that for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I'd be very unhealthy pretty soon, right? So, you know, look, you need red peppers, which are great vitamin C. You need almonds, you need chicken soup, you need spinach, all that kind of stuff. And someone said up here earlier about silos of diversity. So I would tell you, really take a look at your teams or who you're working with. You really do want that diversity. Yeah, that's everything from hiring from different colleges and just one or two special colleges, but hiring from different colleges, different backgrounds, different genders, different everything. That's what the world is diverse. You want to be like that. You're stronger.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's thank Vern and Stephen for being so candid with us.